All right, welcome to Comics Cuts. We got a good show for you guys today. So, we are going to be getting into the rumored third Avengers movie. We're going to be talking about the third Avengers movie is what we're going to be talking about. There's supposedly a new Avengers movie. We've already known that Marvel potentially had a secret additional movie planned that wasn't announced yet. So we're going to be getting into that. That's a big one for tonight. We're going to be getting into Loki being on the Avengers Doomsday set, Ana de Armas being teased by James Mack, who I think she's going to be playing, why Avengers Doomsday is going to be huge, because there's a lot of talk going on online. There's a lot of hate going on towards Avengers Doomsday. And I think a lot of people are just missing it in general. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into Spider-Man Brand New Day using Jackie Chan, Vulture coming back, and James Gunn gives a Batman update. So, all right, first and foremost, the third Avengers film is in addition to Doomsday and Secret Wars, okay? So the rumor is that this movie is going to be coming out in 2027, the summer of 2027. And there's a guy, Murphy's Multiverse. I read an article from him, and he was saying how after rolling out an Avengers film every 3 years before dropping Infinity War and Endgame 1 year apart, the studio has used the first 5 years of the Multiverse Saga to spin a whole lot of disparate tales and introduce a whole lot of new characters, only to never follow up on very many of them. That's left a bad taste in the collective maw of fandom, as heroes such as Shang-Chi, Moon Knight, and She-Hulk have been to date one and dones. Now the Multiverse Saga finds itself accelerating to its end. It becomes increasingly difficult to incorporating them all into the cast alongside the stars announced as part of Avengers Doomsday. However, releasing a third Avengers film, aka a file, I call movies files, into the theaters of July 2027 between Doomsday and Secret Wars might provide the narrative runway to make that possible. So the thing about this that's really interesting is, if you've been listening to me for a while, I've been saying that I felt like we were getting robbed. We were getting robbed. And the reason I felt that is because the Avengers Time Runs Out Hickman saga is the greatest story ever told. Okay. Period. It just is. And Secret Wars is like the swan song finale to that. And it's great. But that Avengers saga is even better. And we really haven't gotten much of it from the MCU. So you're probably wondering, why is that story so good if you haven't read it already? So we're going to get into that. Anyway, this is the title card for Avengers Time Runs Out. Now, I don't know what this movie could be. It also could end up being a Blade movie, right? That's something that Murphy ended up touching on as well. It could be Blade, and they could do Blade, and Blade could be a really cheap movie to make, and it could be an easy win for Marvel, and that could be the case. They did Ant-Man and the Wasp. They did not Spider-Man Far From Home, Captain Marvel, which neither of those movies really had anything to do with Infinity War or Endgame. Okay. This was another title card that was included, which I think is kind of stupid. Why are they going to do a movie called Battle World when Secret Wars is basically Battle World? And none of the Battle World comics are good, but it's also the Illuminati title card. I've also talked about that. And then there is the Avengers Everything Dies. Regardless, whether it's Illuminati, Everything Dies, Time Runs Out, or anything of the sort, you're really getting the same story, okay? And this story, you have to understand, this story starts with basically they find out about the incursions and the Black Swan who comes to warn them. And by the way, that's who I think Ana de Armas is playing. I think Ana de Armas is playing the Black Swan if she's in the movie. James Mack has a pretty spotty record. I wouldn't say he is the most credible scooper in the game. However, it's been rumored that Ana de Armas has been playing Black Swan for a long time. So anyway, let's get into the Avengers, New Avengers, Time Runs Out story, okay? So the incursions become escalated. And in the incursions, as I've described many times before, two Earths collide. They either both explode and die, or one of them survives. So the Illuminati forms behind Captain America's back. Well, first Captain America was involved, and they basically wipe Cap's memory, almost like the Men in Black thing. I think it was Doctor Strange who put a spell on Cap, so Cap forgot, because they knew Captain America was never going to be okay with blowing up another planet to save themselves. And the rest of the Illuminati knew they were going to have to do that. So the Illuminati was a secret group formed by Tony Stark, and the Avengers had really fractured because Tony ended up operating in secrecy from Cap, right? And Namor forms the Cabal, which brings Thanos, Black Swan, Maximus, Terrax, the Black Order to destroy worlds. Black Panther, he's got a vendetta. He swears vengeance on Namor for Wakanda's destruction. They kind of agree in the beginning that they're going to put that off, right? They're like, we need to work together because we need to save Earth. But when this is said and done, like, we're going to fight. And so they agreed to table that fight and that vengeance, which is interesting because if you've also been watching me, you also know that I've said for many times that we also got robbed with Wakanda Forever, because the Namor T'Challa rivalry is one of the best rivalries in comic books. Anyway, so Black Panther had that vendetta because Namor had attacked Wakanda earlier on. Then, and Avengers also had to fight cosmic threats, and Steve led the public team against the builders and the map makers. And I'm going to get into the builders and map makers. Reed Richards, he also ends up building a life raft for them to survive the end of the multiverse, right? Which has kind of been touched on. A lot of people had a theory about the raft being used because that's where General Ross went at the end or the post-credit scene of Captain America, Brave New World. So remember, there were a lot of theories about the raft as well. Now, the other thing was that Dr. Doom, Dr. Doom always wins, okay? So, like, Dr. Doom manipulates Molecule Man to prepare for Battle World. And the final incursion comes between Earth 616 and the Ultimate Universe, and they collide, and only a few survive. And then, in the end, this led directly into Secret Wars, which was Marvel's multiversal reset. And again, if you've been watching my show for a bit, you know I've also, told you a lot of times comics use these crossover events to do a reset for their next line of comics. Secret Wars was used for that as well. But hold on, let's get see it. What's up, Hungry? All right, Hungry Almighty. I'll be honest, I just want Doomsday, then Secret Wars, and then reset. I don't need a third Avengers movie. I disagree, and I'm going to get into that in a second. Okay, so I want to play that comment so everyone can see it. All right. Now, this is the greatest story ever told. And that's one of the reasons I think if there's a possibility of a third Avengers or crossover event type movie, we need it. So this is the greatest story ever told because it has an epic scope. The multiversal stakes that tie everything together, and it basically includes every Marvel title at the time. And moral complexity, these heroes become anti-heroes. Some of them, the Illuminati, cross ethical lines. So you have the moral complexity. You have the rivalries between Namor and Black Panther. Iron Man versus Captain America, and Iron Man and Captain America also have betrayal. You have political drama with Wakanda, Atlantis, Latveria, and the Cosmic Empires just all clashing. The villain spotlight between Thanos, the Cabal, that added weight and tension. There was an Infinity storyline within this run too. And Doom's master plan, which set him up as the ultimate schemer. And then once you get to Secret Wars and you see this guy rob Reed of his family, make Doctor Strange it was wild. And then the sci-fi of it all was just like the sci-fi lore of the incursions and the antimatter injection device. these big ideas like the incursions, the map makers, the builders, the lifeboats. And it was just so cinematic, and it read like an Avengers movie saga with Game of Thrones level intrigue. And it was the perfect setup for Secret Wars, and it had seamless transition into Marvel's, in my opinion, not only Marvel's best event ever, I think it's the greatest comic book story ever told. Now, back to the key factions and players, right? So what you have to understand is that the map makers were corrupted AI that were wiping out planets in dead universes. But there were also the builders. And the builders were a cosmic race warning of collapse, but they were defeated by Avengers in a massive war. And then you had the Illuminati, which was Iron Man, Captain America, before Doctor Strange put the spell on him, Reed Richards, Black Panther, Namor, Black Bolt, Beast, which was, the Illuminati was formed with a purpose. You have to keep that in mind. It wasn't just like a superhero team. They were a group on a mission, and they had moral complexity within that mission, okay? And that mission was to be a secret council to stop the incursions and save themselves. And they ended up going underground when they got exposed. Namor had his own cabal of Thanos, Black Swan, Maximus, Terrax, the Black Order, and they wanted to destroy alternate Earths without hesitation, and that escalated the destruction and the incursions and all that kind of stuff. Now, Black Panther, he was the moral center early on, but again, Black Panther is a very like moral and noble leader, but he will never like forget about his vengeance. There are many stories where Black Panther, specifically T'Challa, will have a vengeance that he's out for, but he's like, this is more important right now, but I'm coming for you. He just did it in the Imperial storyline that Hickman is writing right now. It happened in an issue that dropped yesterday. So Doctor Strange, he turned to dark magic because he, became corrupted in his pursuit of power. And again, that's why it's not out of the ordinary for Doctor Strange to partner up with Doctor Doom. And that's why I could see that coming earlier on, because Doctor Strange sticks to his convictions, and he will always stand on his convictions. He did it in No Way Home. Remember, Peter had to leave him hanging over the Grand Canyon in the Mirrorverse or whatever it was called. Yeah, so Doctor Strange is like that. Reed Richards builds the lifeboats to save remnants of existence, and he was a key survivor. Black Swan, she was the incursion expert, and she was loyal to Doctor Doom, and she manipulates a lot of events towards Battleworld. But when Black Swan first came around, they weren't so experienced in incursions, so they learned a lot about incursions from Black Swan. And she was just so dramatic, like, oh, man. And let me just show you. This is Black Swan, okay? I mean, come on. You think of Ana de Armas in an outfit like that, like explaining incursions to everyone else while they have no idea what's going on. That's going to hit, all right? So the map makers, and then there were the Black Priests. And the Black Priests were mystic warriors, collapsing worlds, and they were revealed to be Doctor Strange's faction. So again, Doctor Strange, I don't want to say he's evil, but he has moral complexity to him. Just the moral complexity, the politics, the stakes, the cosmic, the lore, the impending doom. This story really has it all, okay? So Hungry Almighty, if they decide to introduce the rebooted Avengers in Secret Wars, do you think the rebooted Avengers will be the main characters of Avengers Secret Wars? I think it's really difficult to tell because it's really, really far out. But one thing that's interesting to me about answering this question, and I think it's a great question, and I think it's worth asking, because when Kevin Feige did that interview with one of the Hollywood trades recently, he said that this Avengers cycle event, meaning both these Avengers movies, I call them Avengers cycles because it's a cycle of two movies that are really wrapped in one story. But he said that Infinity War and Endgame was about endings, and Secret Wars, I think he specifically said Secret Wars, but Secret Wars is about a new beginning. So I think it's possible we're going to see the new X-Men, maybe the new Avengers. If I had to guess right now, I would say we're probably going to see some of the new X-Men. I would say probably not the new Avengers team. And I'll tell you why, because I don't see them including the new Avengers when they're paying Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. God knows how much money they're paying Chris, but they're paying them to come back. We already know Captain America's basically confirmed at this point. You know my theory. I think if they're bringing back the Fox X-Men and reaching back to the early 2000s, they're in a wave of poor box office. They already have RDJ on set, and they're paying him $100 million for 2 movies. My theory is that he's not only playing Doctor Doom, but because of the perfect storm I just described, I think he's also playing Iron Man. Okay? So the Beyonders were also important to this story too. The Beyonders, who are these omnipotent beings outside of the multiverse, they were created as bombs to destabilize the reality, and they triggered the incursions, and Doom ended up killing them, stealing their power, and forging Battleworld, which again was scraps of all these planets that had died from the incursions and these bombs. Now, here's the other thing, though, okay? Because Loki was on the Avengers Doomsday set. I think we got it confirmed by, I think it was in one of the Cosmic Circus Alex Perez drops recently, that we're not getting the Beyond. No, we're not Beyond. Sorry, we're not getting Molecule Man. So it's very possible that Loki could. Listen, Loki right now, as it is, he sits beyond time, holding the timelines together. We saw that at the end of Loki season 2, right? Now, like the Beyonders, Loki manipulates the multiverse from a place outside of existence. And Loki, I think, is going to replace the Beyonders in Secret Wars, which would simplify Hickman's lore. Because you have to keep in mind, this Hickman storyline is like almost 100 comic issues total. Because it's the Avengers run, then it's the new Avengers run, and then it's Secret Wars. So I think it's like 72 or 73 issues from both of those Avengers runs that you're supposed to read together, and then another 10 issues of Secret Wars. Yes, it goes to issue 9, but there's an issue 0. So it's actually 10 issues. Now, I think Loki is going to replace the Beyonders in Secret Wars, and Doom is going to steal Loki's power and mirror Doom stealing Beyonders' power. And the TVA, I think, is going to replace the Molecule Men as the MCU's reset mechanism. So that's what I think they're going to do. Okay. Listen, this is the greatest story ever. I promise you, if you want to understand why comics are so great and why comics still thrive as something outside of the movies, you read this comic run and you will understand why the experience of reading comics is so incredible. Okay. Anyway, that's my theory. And I think, by the way, the interesting thing with Loki is that Loki became good again, but he could easily become evil again, right? So that's one of the other things. Anyway, Ana de Armas is teased by James Mack for Black Swan. I think she would make a phenomenal Black Swan. And I also think that she would crush it. And, like, you have to keep – she's a huge name right now. I think she's dating Tom Cruise. They just had photos of her the other day. Women love her. Guys love her. And, like, I know this cast is already, like, stacked as hell. But Ana de Armas is one of the few names that you could add to that roster and still bring new additional attention to. So I think that's a W. I hope that's the case. But the other thing is, I think that this movie is going to be huge. Okay. I really do. And I think a lot of people are missing the big reasons why. And they're so simple and they're so right in front of our face. Remember that Chairs thing they did? Of course you do. That Chairs event, aside from everyone's gonna be like, oh my God, you know, tens of millions of people sat down and watched Chairs. No, people refresh the page. Okay. But that cast is insane. You having that cast, all these characters in an Avengers movie, the entire internet has an ecosystem around talking around Marvel. Okay. Now, I'm one of many podcasters. We're all on social media all the time talking about these movies, all these stars. This movie is going to be huge. And yeah, Marvel may have not had an easy year at the box office. I promise you, unless the economy is like blown the hell up next year, this movie is going to do very, very well. People are missing the big picture, and the big picture are the simple things: the cast names, the character names, the fact that it's an Avengers movie, the fact that it's Marvel, the fact that RDJ is coming back as Doctor Doom. Like, people care about this. You know, like that post when Robert Downey Jr. announced he was coming back as Doctor Doom, that Instagram post got 20 million likes. Okay. Like, come on, man. Yeah, there's drama. Yeah, there's people that hate it for whatever reason. This movie is going to be fine. And by the way, even if, some crazy fluke happens and it's not going to be fine, you know what they're not going to stop doing? They're not going to be like, oh, Secret Wars is canceled. Oh, the Mutant Saga is canceled. Okay, it's all coming. Of course, we want these movies to thrive and these brands to thrive. But you know what? One thing you will never get from me, and maybe this is the wrong show for you, because I'm always going to keep it real for you. I want these movies to do well. I'm a fan, but I'm not going to shift my position to support whatever the hell they're doing. Okay, I'm going to keep it real with you. I'm going to give you my honest analysis. I'm going to critique things about movies before they come out, and that's one of the reasons I made my own show, because that was important to me. So anyway, which, by the way, I have an additional new exciting announcement for you guys. I'll probably be ready to tell you next week. Everything about this show is going to be staying the same, but I have something additional that I'm not going to say anything more, but I'm going to be telling you next week. Okay, so let's get to Hungry's comments. Wait, let me see what else. Before we get to Hungry's comments. Okay, yeah, we'll get to Hungry's comments. So Hungry. But at the same time, as I always say, it's called Avengers Secret Wars. It doesn't make sense to introduce the rebooted X-Men, but not the rebooted Avengers in Avengers Secret Wars. Well, I disagree, because they're still going to have Avengers, right? Like, they're still going to have, whether it's the Multiverse Saga Avengers, the OG Avengers, they're still going to have Avengers. And I hate to say this, but I always saw them using the Avengers as a ticket sales thing for these movies, because they didn't feel like Avengers movies to me for the longest time. But now that we're talking about like Iron Man again, okay. But also, you got to keep in mind, like, new characters did come in through Secret Wars. Miles Morales came from the Ultimate Universe 1610 to 616 in Secret Wars. Okay. I could see Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars ranging in the billion to $1.5 billion, but I highly doubt you're going to get the 2 billion Avengers Infinity War Endgame numbers. I think you are probably right there. I don't think we're going to see a two. Like, if they do the third movie, maybe, but here's the problem for looking at a $2 billion movie right now, okay? Box office is down, and that's an industry problem. It's not a Marvel problem exclusively. It's an industry problem. And the industry is seeing poor box office. The economy has uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the worst things you could do in the economy. Uncertainty creates instability. Anyway, yeah, I don't think it's going to do 2 billion, but it is interesting to say, only a year ago, Deadpool and Wolverine was an R-rated movie that did $1.3 billion. And it was pretty much outside of everything that was going on in the MCU at that time. It was a Marvel event movie. and they did $1.3 billion. So Marvel still could pull it off. I think Avengers Doomsday is going to do $1 billion. You know, the last time we saw anything close to 2 billion was Spider-Man No Way Home, which did 1.9, but that was like, you know, I think it was like 2021. So people were just able to go to the movies again after COVID. And it had Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire. So that was a big deal. Okay. So the other thing is that the secret third Avengers movie, could ensure that the studio would own the box office for 12 straight months. Okay. And whether it's Avengers, Time Runs Out, Avengers Battle World, Everything Dies, Illuminati, an Illuminati project, by the way, at one point was 100% in development, you know, or it's a bridge spanning it, whichever one if they do make this third additional Avengers movie that bridges Doomsday and Secret Wars, first of all, it's fascinating. Like that would not be the same formula they did with Infinity War and Endgame, and it would be a huge box office cash opportunity for Marvel. Okay, now logistically speaking, and the real, like, getting into the nitty gritty here, there's a real possibility that work has been being done on these movies, even under different names, for at least 3 years. These ideas could be cut and pasted or altered under the purview of a different creative team. And typically, principal photography on a Marvel Studios film lasts 3 to 4 months. Doomsday is already in its 5th month, and Secret Wars was originally set to film back to back before a year's worth of space was added. But who's to say that between now and September 2026, that cameras aren't continually rolling, right? So logistically, it could work. And I thought for a second, I was like, nah, probably not. But when you think about it and you like look at how Marvel makes movies, they can make it happen. Now, the other interesting piece is that Spider-Man Brand New Day was originally supposed to be a Battle World movie. You know, when Kevin Feige first spoke about Spider-Man Brand New Day, he said that he said something like, I forget the exact words, but he did say something to the effect of, yeah, I said the movie is going to be a grounded movie, but I didn't necessarily say it was grounded on Earth. So I think at some point they were planning on making Spider-Man Brand New Day a multiversal movie that was supposed to provide additional runway leading into Avengers Doomsday. But we know that's not the case anymore. And we're going to get to some of the Spider-Man Brand New Day changes for a second. But if you think about it, if Feige and the studio execs at Marvel were planning for Spider-Man Brand New Day to help tell additional story to launch Avengers Doomsday, and they changed that, where are they going to put that build up? They could only put it in so many places. They could either put it into the beginning of Avengers Doomsday, or they could make Avengers Doomsday more of the build up, then make an interval Avengers project between Doomsday and Secret Wars. But whatever's build up and establishment of the Avengers Doomsday Secret Wars story they wanted to tell in Spider-Man Brand New Day obviously is not happening in Spider-Man Brand New Day, and it has to happen somewhere else. That's all I'm saying, okay? If they made an Avengers, Illuminati, or Time Runs Out movie, I would lose my mind, okay? And like, this is something, and if you've been listening to me from the old show for a while, how many times have I said we're getting robbed because we should be in the greatest MCU story ever right now? Okay, so this is like, my prayers are answered if this happens. Okay. Now, There's another movie that was talked about that's being built up right now. And this movie, hold on. It's called Axe. Avengers, X-Men, Eternals. Now, Axe was all right. I think it was a little overrated when it came out. I think some fans liked it, some fans didn't. But what you need to know about Axe is that it was a story about the Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, I think from 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And it was also called Judgment Day, Axe Judgment Day. And long story short, it was about a lot of these characters and Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals were judged by the Celestials, and they had to face their Judgment Day to the Celestials. This could be a cool movie too, because we're going to have the Avengers and the X-Men, but the only thing that I think it's a little odd is that we've only been hearing that they're not making an Eternals project, that Marvel was so disappointed about Eternals that they just scrapped anything with the Eternals after that. Listen, I liked Eternals. I think Eternals was a good movie. I think it was a little too smart for a Marvel movie, and I think that it went over a lot of fans' heads. I hate to say it, but listen, a lot of the fandom is not that bright, and sometimes it's like, how much can you dumb things down sometimes? So anyway, but there was the actor. Hold on, I'm going to look up his name right now because I always mess it up. So Kumail Nanjiani, and he's a great actor. He was the Indian guy from Eternals. He was in The Big Sick. Anyway, and now everyone's talking about him playing Booster Gold. To give you an idea of how big Marvel thought the Eternals were going to be, they had another 6 projects with that Indian actor from Eternals. Another 6 projects he was signed on to do. Not one of them happened, okay? So, I think that the Axe storyline could work better in the MCU than it did in the comics, because in the comics they had a lot of tie-ins, meaning, a tie-in is like they have the Axe labeled books, and then you might be reading a Cyclops solo run, and they'll label that as like an Axe tie-in. And you had to read a lot of the tie-ins, but the tie-ins sucked. And they do it to sell additional comics. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. And people get really fed up when it doesn't. But they just bring the story down. They make people enjoy the story less when it doesn't work. And Axe had too many tie-ins, and I think it would work better in the MCU. But I just wanted to say, I don't know how much I buy this, because it seems like Marvel really just abandoned the Eternals in general. And now they're talking about the X-Men. So why are we talking about an Axe project? That's just, I think they should focus on getting the X-Men right and establishing the X-Men before talking about a project like this that is just ridiculously ambitious considering where we're at right now. Okay. Now, all right, let's go to some comments. Could you see the Brave and the Bold making $1 billion? It's hard to tell. I would say at this point, no. And I would probably say no because I don't think the actor is going to be someone that's well known. I think it's going to be someone more along the lines of someone like David Corenswet. However, the Brave and the Bold, you know what the Brave and the Bold has as an advantage is that it's going to be after multiple installments in the DCU before Brave and the Bold. So that means the DCU had its opportunity to bring in new fans with Superman, to bring in new fans with Peacemaker, to bring in new fans with Supergirl, to bring in new fans with Lanterns. So the DCU fan base is going to grow to be much larger for Batman, the Brave and the Bold than it had the chance to be for Superman. All right. I'm going to stop asking if what I say makes sense because I think I'm pretty good at explaining things. So it's like a diss to myself. Does that make sense? Yeah, of course it makes sense. I explained it. I'm not humble. All right. So anyway, now what do we have next on the list? So let's get to Hungry's comments. I think the rebooted Avengers won't get their own movie, but instead be used for movie storylines like Axe, House of M, World War Hulk, AVX, etc. So I hope that's not the case. I just love the Avengers. I love Avengers movies. And I also could think it's a little trying to lower my AC. Anyway, I think Avengers is too big of a cash cow for them. I don't see them abandoning Avengers movies. However, maybe that's not the case if they are doing X-Men and X-Men crushing it, But I want to see Avengers movies continue. But it's going to be tricky because when they cast a new Iron Man, when they cast a new Captain America, those actors are going to be compared to Robert Downey Jr., to Chris Evans. Like, that's very difficult. And by the way, that is something that's 100% on James Gunn's mind right now. Because when they cast the DCU Batman, whoever it is going to have to be compared to Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson is a phenomenal actor. He's very talented. He was amazing as Batman, and that DCU actor is going to have to be compared to him. Do you think RDJ as Doom will stay? I do, yes. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense to keep the reboot. Actually, in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to keep the rebooted Fantastic Four, but get a new Doctor Doom when RDJ is Pedro's Doom. It's tricky because Robert Downey Jr., I feel like he doesn't want to commit to the Marvel scheduling anymore. And that's the only thing that makes me think he might not stay on as Doctor Doom. I hope he does. And if he doesn't, I'm going to be annoyed he took the role. Like, they should have given it to someone who was willing to stay on after Secret Wars. And I love Robert Downey Jr., okay? He's Iron Man is my favorite MCU character. Robert Downey Jr. is my favorite MCU actor. But I'm just telling you, like, I think it would be selfish of him to do it if he wasn't willing to stay on. 100%. Okay, so Spider-Man Brand New Day using Jackie Chan. So Jackie Chan's action team is working with Spider-Man for the action scenes, and that's paired with Destin Daniel Cretton, the guy who did Shang-Chi, directing this movie. I'm just telling you, the action, the spectacle in this movie is going to be insane. We are going to get, like, prepare for the Amazing Spider-Man web slinging to be blown out of the water with Spider-Man Brand New Day. I think this is going to be the greatest Spider-Man movie of all time. I really do. And I just think it's awesome that Jackie Chan is involved in a Marvel movie. That's crazy. The other thing, though, that I do think is interesting is, like, there's a couple different words that get floated around when talking about the Spider-Man movie, okay? And it's grounded and street level. And I think both of them mean different things, but get conflated. Grounded meaning it's not like a crazy out of this world feeling of a movie, and street level meaning street level villains. Something you could see happening on the street. Now, I always said what I really wanted out of this movie was a New York classic Spider-Man movie. And I think they're trying to give us that. But there's another bullet point to this. And that is that, we really haven't had a Spider-Man solo movie in the way the Spider-Man movies were prior to the MCU. Every Spider-Man movie has other characters, and this movie is turning out to not be so different. I think it's going to be a little different because none of these characters are going to know, at least initially, that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Iron Man knew that. Nick Fury knew that. And, of course, Doctor Strange did too. But now we're dealing with the Hulk and the Punisher. And I do think that you could do a grounded story with them. I do think you could give us a New York classic Spider-Man movie, but it's not going to feel like a classic Spider-Man solo movie. I'm still really excited about this movie because I think it's going to be great, but I do hope that it does feel as much like a classic New York Spider-Man movie as it possibly can. I'm just saying, though, like the more we hear about it, the bigger it gets. It just feels like this is more of the same, except for it's brand new day. And it's like after Peter basically grew up as Spider-Man, because again, when he finally heard with great power comes great responsibility, that's what led him to make the decision at the end in the donut shop where he said, he didn't say anything. He just turned around and left. But you get what I'm saying. He sacrificed his relationship with MJ and Ned. Okay. So one thing I will give TASM to is the marketing and trailers were absolute peak. The music, action, everything in the marketing was just crazy. I agree. I think TASM 2 is very underrated. I just wish Peter Parker was accurate. That's the one thing that pisses me off about that movie. Now, the other interesting thing, and this, I don't know if I buy it. I just wanted to include it from before, but supposedly from Hello, My Time to Shine, Hello, is saying that Vulture is coming back. And why? What? I mean, listen, if we have someone like Tombstone or Kingpin that manipulated Punisher, Hulk, and Spider-Man to be fighting each other, I just don't understand why Vulture is coming back. And I like Vulture, but I have no idea why Vulture would be in this movie. But I do think it's interesting, and I'm not opposed to it. Like I said, I like Vulture. I think Michael Keaton did a great job as him. I think he was a good villain for Homecoming, but I just don't see what he could be doing in this. Okay, so. All right, now to the DCU. So James Gunn gave us a Batman update. James Gunn said, we'll have to see what we're doing with Batman. We're figuring that out. Obviously, we know some basics about where it's going with Batman, but we're also figuring some things out. Everything's fluid. Feels like we keep getting these like once in a blue moon updates that's just more of the same, and it doesn't really mean anything. I'm just curious to what the hell is going on with Batman at DC. We don't really know anything about the Batman Part 2. We don't really know anything about Batman for the DCU. But listen, I think the DCU, like with Superman, Supergirl, Lanterns, Peacemaker, I think it could be fine for a little bit. But like Batman is the guy. When they release a comic accurate, fantastical Batman movie fans don't even know. Okay. Like I was thinking about this, right? When I first saw the Dark Knight trilogy, when I was a kid, I didn't read comics. I didn't know that like that realism version of Batman wasn't the real Batman. And if you don't read comics, how would you know that? Unless you watch some of the animated stuff, but like, even so, I don't know if you would know that. And we never got a Batman movie where it's described as a comic book come to life. And I think a lot of, moviegoers, they only get to know the characters that they get to experience. And most people experience these characters through the movies. That's why so many people thought Superman was this dark and gritty character that compromises on killing sometimes. Or that Batman compromised on killing in Batman versus Superman, because that's what people experienced. And with Batman, we've only gotten the Dark Knight trilogy, and The Pattinson movie. Yeah, of course, there's the Tim Burton movies and the ones from Batman Forever and Batman Robin, but I don't even really count those because those just suck and they don't even have business being Batman movies. So I think that like if you're just a normal person and you watch movies, or casual as the kids like to say, you would think that Batman is this realistic hero that could like kind of live in the real world, right? But that's not the case. And I'm telling you right now, because of the Dark Knight trilogy and the Batman Epic Crime Saga, which is what they call the Reeves verse, when they finally do release the DCU Batman movie, and it is a comic accurate version of Batman, his mythos, and Gotham, people aren't prepared for how crazy they're going to go for that movie. And that movie is going to be huge when that happens. All James Gunn needs to do is give us a Brave and the Bold release date. You know what? Seriously. I do want to know, though. I really do want to know who the villain is for the Batman Part 2, because I think it might be the Court of Owls, and I will lose my shit. I love the Court of Owls. That's the comic that got me into comics. To be honest, you don't need to read comics to know the fantastical Batman if you play the Arkham. That's a good point. But if you play the Arkham games and watch animated Batman content, then you would see it. Fair, but most people aren't watching animated content, and a lot of people aren't playing video games. I'm talking about people that go to the movies. If you just watch movies and you only saw like the movies, you wouldn't know, and you would think that the Dark Knight movies and the Reeves movies were comic accurate. You wouldn't even really understand the concept of comic accurate versus live action and how that plays out. You know what I mean? So also, hate to break it to you, but the live action is not the source material, So the live action gets a lot of things wrong too. Sorry, the animated gets a lot of things wrong too, because they're taking from the source material, and because they're taking from the source material, they're not always so accurate on doing that, It just is what it is. So, but I got to tell you, I love Superman. Superman was great. It was comic accurate. I saw someone on Twitter say like how Superman flopped, and this was today. And I said back to them, I was like, if $600 million box office is a flop, the industry would collapse. Like, some of the discourse is just so ridiculous. It's insane. So I don't know. I can't believe the Snyder thing is still going on. It really is crazy. Animated and video games are closer to the source material than movies. I think it's. I'm trying to think. Not always. They can be. Not always. Definitely not with Marvel. And not always with DC. Sometimes they make some egregious changes to the stories and the characters in the animated. They did it in The Long Halloween. They did it in Hush. They made the Riddler one of the bigger villains, and they made him into a bigger deal. So 100%, that's not always the case. By the way, back to Marvel for a second. So Josh from Den of Nerds, his theory is that Trammell Tillman is playing Kang the Conqueror. He thinks Trammell Tillman is playing Kang the Conqueror, and Trammell Tillman is in Spider-Man, which, if they're going to make Spider-Man multiversal, if we get Kang the Conqueror, like, I would be happy. I would make an exception for Kang the Conqueror. I love Kang the Conqueror. I think that would be really cool. But it is interesting because they did want to have more of that multiversal build-up in Spider-Man Brand New Day, and now they don't. So do you think they're going to make a third movie, Hungry? Do you think they're going to do a third Avengers movie? I doubt it because I feel like they're just trying to get the reset. That's a fair point. A lot of people think that. A lot of people, they think they want to get through this and get to the reset. There's a lot of people that would agree with you on that. So anyway, a bit short of a show for tonight. I'll leave it for another minute or so. So Hungry, if you got any other questions, if you want to ask my thoughts on Robin and the DCU, I'll answer whatever you got. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks for joining. As always, thank you for your support. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you. I'll have a show on Monday. Yeah, I'll probably do the show on Monday. I know it's Labor Day, but I'll probably do the show I'm going to do the show at 9:00 on Monday and on Thursday of next week. And I have a pretty special announcement coming that I'm really excited about. And I will be sharing that with you guys through Twitter, X, and on Threads. So stay tuned. And till next time, peace out. Thanks again.